Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Really Living Podcast. I'm your host, Hannah, and I'm joined with Ashley, Ronald, Joy, and Ryan. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about going all in for God and what that looks like, what that means. And yeah, that's going to be it. To start, we're going to do a little bit of an activity, and I'm going to ask you guys some questions, and you guys are going to say agree or disagree with the statement that I give you, and just tell me why. Okay, so first one is, as a Christian, it's okay to listen to secular music. Agree or disagree?
I think it depends on like what type of songs you're actually listening to. So like for instance, I can throw an example like Heal the World by Michael Jackson, right? That's basically talking about healing the world, trying to make it a better place versus another song that could be talking about going to the club, throwing $100 bills on the floor. Like those are two different things, right? Mm-hmm. So one is you're looking at it from a positive point versus the other one, it's not really positive. So I think for me, it really depends on what the message is saying.
For me, I'd also agree. I just want to point out, like, all secular, music that doesn't explicitly talk about God isn't disrespecting Him or doing a disservice. It could be neutral or even uplifting. But having discernment would be the key. Just be mindful of what you're listening to.
I disagree. I do agree with Ronald and Ryan, but it's just, I don't want to say I'm looking at it from a negative perspective, but I think that everything we do should glorify God, including our music. And even though there is secular music that is like love songs and like, I don't know, going on a boat with your family or something, right? Like, I think it should include Christ in it, per se. I don't know. That's just me, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it depends on the person. I think I agree, honestly, with both stances, both the agrees and disagree, because, yeah, I think it depends on where you're at with your personal walk with Christ and what that conviction is for you. I don't think it's a sin if you listen to secular music. That is uplifting and love songs, but I also, I think it just, it depends on the type, what Ronald was saying.
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on the person, right? If it affects you, if music is something that's really important to you and you really take it to heart and the words and everything is really influencing who you are as a person, I think you got to be especially mindful of what you're listening to in that case, right? For some people, music is not that deep, right? They can listen to whatever and they're just not even, it doesn't affect their day. But for some, it is really profound. And I think in those cases, I think it is especially important to make sure that you're feeding yourself with music that is more constructive, more leaning towards praising and uplifting God. Okay, next statement is, I don't need godly relationships in order to have a strong relationship with God. Agree or disagree?
I disagree. I think having godly relationships around you helps you draw closer to Christ. That's why it's important to go to things like church. We have our youth group. We're all around each other, and like the presence of Christ, the Spirit is there. And we can all feel the love, Mm-hmm. Like we're all just very cordial, and it's very easy to speak to each other and be open with each other and show that love that Christ showed us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with him. I disagree as well, because like in this journey of life, it can be tough at times. So I think having a community can really help you in certain areas. So like, for instance, some people don't like being vulnerable, but it kind of helps when you have the right people around, especially the people that like they can relate to you and you can relate to them, and they're on their walk with Christ as well. So it doesn't feel like you're all alone in a sense. So I think, yeah, having those relationships, they're super important.
Yeah, like Jesus had friends, the 12 disciples. He also had an inner circle of 3, Peter, James, and John. So I think that we should, and it is needed to have godly community, again, what these guys were saying, to just uplift you and to support you through seasons of life. And so I think, what's that quote where it's like, if you can go far alone, but you go further together, or something like that. It's like, I don't know the quote, but anyways, it's along those lines where yes, you can go places alone, but you can go much further when you have people around you and people that are equally yoked to you in the sense of share similar values and walks of faith as you. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I also agree and think that imagine in difficult times when you have no one to lean on. Those are times where your mind can wander. You can start to have depressive thoughts, and it gets hard. But when you have a group, a Christ-like community surrounding you, you have people you can talk to, pastors, people like connections that can link you to the right resources too. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're all kind of in agreement that, yeah, godly relationships are important to strengthen your relationship with God. And now let's talk a little bit about ungodly relationships, or maybe relationships that maybe God is just not in the middle of them, right? You may have friends. We all may have friends that aren't necessarily in the church or Christians, but they're technically good people, right? They've never done anything to you. They're still good friends of yours. But then suddenly they do something that's a little bit questionable. And now you're struggling with God and thinking, oh, am I being called to step away from this person? How do you handle that? How do you go about that?
That's a hard one. Yes. Because it's so real. It's so real. And this is actually something that I've walked through, and I'm still kind of walking through in some aspects, because as you continue to grow in your relationship with God, you don't want to be that person that cuts people off just because they're not where you are. In terms of it, they could be Christian friends who are maybe not as far along in their faith as you, or friends that aren't Christian at all. And I don't want to be that person, because I don't want people to feel as if, oh, I'm better than them, or I'm cutting them off because they're no longer deserving of my time because of the lifestyle that they're living, when that's not what Jesus did. Like, Jesus still sat at the tables with the tax collectors and the sinners and still ate with them. And so I think it's important for us to still, in whatever way that we can, if it's a temptation for you where the friends that are in your life are going out and partying, and if that's a temptation for you, then you do need to be responsible about that and take a step back. But I feel as if, for me personally, it's not so much as a temptation. So the friends that I do have that are still more so into that lifestyle, I can still hang around them and not be tempted by the things that they're interested in. But I will admit that it's not something that, like, I'm not hanging out with them on a regular basis. I think I'm just more drawn to hang out with people that are more similar to me in my values in that sense, and have or find more wholesome ways to have fun. But I just don't feel comfortable completely cutting those people off unless there is reason to, where like the circumstances, whatever it may be, like really call for me, where the Lord is like, no, you need to really cut this person off from your life. And you do it. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if God is not in the center of like friendship, relationship, then that friendship or relationship is always at risk, always has a chance to pull me away from Him. It's very important for me to stand firm in my faith and my beliefs and morals in Christ. So when I see things that don't line up with that, I need to either move accordingly or just be the best example of Christ I could be. Like I saw a quote somewhere that said, well, your ungodly friends, or maybe your friends that are not in the faith, or like be careful how you act around them, how you treat them, because they might be the only Bible you ever open.
Yeah, no, that's totally right.
Yes. And like going on after that, it's, since we're their Bible, maybe cutting them off may not be the way to go, because if you leave, there might not be another example, and then they may go back to their old ways. But if you're there as an example and you're speaking life into them, maybe sharing verses with them once in a while, then maybe that seed that you plant can go a long way. Just like the pastor was preaching today, that seed that friend planted when he was 14 went a long way.
Yeah.
And came back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's important to recognize that, right? We are called to be, planters of those seeds, and that God will do the rest. But it is also important, just like we talked about in music, the type of person you are is going to, determine whether you can be that seed planter if you're strong enough in your faith already. But if you're still kind of struggling a little bit, if you're still growing, if you're still kind of new to the faith and you're kind of tempted to wander, I think it's like, okay, can I be a strong influence to the people around me, or are these people influencing me, and do I need to cut them off, right? So that's something that is important to take into consideration. As a Christian, it's fine to drink alcohol occasionally. Agree or disagree?
These are great questions. We're going in. We are. I think, again, it will come down to personal conviction. I think when Paul talks about getting drunk, living that lifestyle, I think that's what the sin is. I personally don't feel the conviction that having a glass of wine at an event is inherently sinful. So I think it just depends, again, on your personal convictions. If you deem that drinking wine once a month is a sin, then don't do it. You know, and I think that we should also be mindful too, where if I'm hanging around people who maybe have that conviction, I will choose to not drink alcohol around that person because I don't want that person to also stumble into sin. And so, yeah, I think so overall, I think it just depends on your personal conviction, but I would say that I would disagree with the statement that it was a sin. Is that what you said?
No, I said as a Christian, it's fine.
Oh, it's fine. Oh, okay.
Occasionally.
Then I would say I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I would also say I agree. The Bible does say that the sin in that is just getting drunk. So drinking to get drunk, that would be a problem. But like Ashley said, if it's just an event or maybe a glass of wine after a long day of work or something, like that'd be fine occasionally, as long as the self-control is really big. It is repeated a lot of times in the Word. So if you stay big on that, just control yourself and try not to catch yourself getting drunk or letting it creep back into your life, because those things easily become big habits that just spiral out of control, then it could be fine.
Yeah, so I just looked up a verse. 1 Peter chapter 4, it says, "But the end of all things is at hand. Be therefore sober and watch unto prayer." So yes, I also agree. But then at the same time, just we don't drink to get drunk. And be mindful of who we're surrounding ourselves with, because the company that we keep has a huge influence. For example, you're out drinking, or no, sorry. You're out drinking. You're out and someone's like, "Oh, who wants drinks? Who wants a cocktail or something?" And then you have one. But some people, if you're not around a godly community, it could escalate. It could go into 3 drinks, 4 drinks, and then now we're not sober-minded. So, yeah, something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's also on that same note of like, depending on who you're with, I think is also really impactful, because you can be with people who are Christian as well, and then maybe, you're all out to eat and you're having like a glass of wine or just like a cocktail or whatever, but they all share your similar values, so you guys all understand that you're not there to get drunk, right? It's something that you pair with, versus maybe with secular friends, people that aren't in the church, and you're out with them to dinner and you get a drink and they don't know those values, right? They see you getting a drink and then you're like, "Oh, this girl drinks," or this guy drinks, and it's normal for them, right? And so it's also important to keep in mind what you're doing, just like with the music you're listening to or how you're acting. Who are you drinking in front of, right? And I think that's something to keep in mind as well. And just on a point that Ryan touched about, which I think we need to be careful, is like, again, I kind of agree. Occasional drinking is maybe okay, but again, it very much depends on who you are as a person, because a lot of people fall into addictions, and I almost want to lean to say disagree, even though I do it, but I would say it's better to just avoid the temptation altogether, right? And I'm not perfect on this note, but I think it would say, because we're kind of like, it's kind of like playing with fire. It's like seeing how far you can go until you're tempted to maybe order a second drink, and kind of go from there. So it can very much quickly escalate, and thinking that, oh yeah, it's okay to maybe have a glass after a long day of work, but why can't we like
drink water
and have a little Bible study, and that's our way of relaxing, instead of, resorting to stuff like a glass of wine, because then that can turn into a bottle of wine, a case, right, and stuff like that. So for some people it's okay, but for the majority, it's going to end up in some sort of trivial problem or addiction. So it's okay to have sex with the person you're dating, knowing that you're going to get married. Agree or disagree?
Disagree. Yeah, so I disagree because God made sex between a man and a woman who are married, and that is like sex is a symbolism of marriage. That's like the proof in God's eyes that a covenant has been made between a man and a woman. So doing it because, I live with him, he's my boyfriend of 7 years and stuff, he cooks and cleans for me, like, no. No, I think it should be reserved for a man and woman who are married.
Yeah, basically what she said. But like it should be like I think a special thing between a couple that's married and something that's not done before marriage.
Yeah, marriage is supposed to be something sacred, something reserved between a man and a woman just for their marriage, and waiting that whole time is what makes it worth it. Well, I don't want to go into too much detail about that, but like I can't really speak about that. But like,
I have a point though.
Yeah.
Some people might, for our viewers, listeners, some might say, okay, but we're engaged and, we've been together for so long. We know each other inside and out. Mm-hmm. We study the Bible. We're Christians. And I don't know, he's my man. Like, he's my husband.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
I would say that, again, it's something that is meant for marriage for a reason. And I think thinking that just because you're going to get married isn't a good enough answer, because God is calling us to wait. So I think, even though we may not know it, we may not see it, I think there's something beautiful in that waiting, in that being patient and holding off until you can get married, because then we'll reap the full benefit of what God meant with it, right? But I think at that point, just saying, oh, I'm going to get married, we're already engaged anyways, is really just an excuse, and not trusting that God's telling you to wait for a reason. You know what I mean? And there's also something I want to say fulfilling about being like, I was able to wait. Like, we were able to wait, and we were able to develop the self-control and put those things aside and say, okay, God, we're trusting you that this is the way you wanted things done. And sometimes we don't even know why, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't fully get the answer of like, this is exactly why you should wait. God just said wait. And so I think that should be a good enough reason too.
Mm-hmm. And it's a good way to center God in that relationship, instead of the worldly standards that we have today. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So last one is, I'm free to do whatever I want and still live a godly life. Agree or disagree?
I just think that's inconsistent with just how Christ has called us to live. Like, sure, you can do anything you want. I think Paul says this somewhere in the New Testament, but not everything is beneficial. So we do have the freedom to, but what is that really doing for you as a person and your walk with God? How is that benefiting you? So, those are just my immediate thoughts. So I disagree with that.
yeah, I also disagree with that. The Bible says, Jesus says, if anyone wants to follow him, that they must deny themselves daily, take up their cross, and follow him. And for me, that means not denying myself whatever pleasures, habits that may get in the way, or things I want to put first before Christ, or maybe just in the moment, like a feeling. Denying those things, those desires, any maybe dreams, aspirations I may have, and focusing on him first and foremost every day.
I disagree because I feel like it's easy to get distracted in the world we live in. So I feel like as long as you want to live a path where God is in the center of your life, I feel like you have to kind of distance yourself from like whatever is going on into the world and focus on your journey with Christ.
Mm-hmm. And one would ask, so what is whatever you want? Define that. Is that partying or is that spending time with God? Because if it's that case, then sure. But even then, God leads us to read certain things and gives us understanding. So wouldn't it just be like, oh, Russian roulette with the Bible, pick whatever verse you want. Yeah.
And God also calls us to be set apart as well. So how can we be set apart from the world and look differently if we're acting as though we are the same as everybody else, So, yeah.
I feel like that's the thing where we have to pray for a sense of direction from God. Because like I said, it's easy for us to get distracted from like the worldly stuff that's going on. So I think it's very important to pray for like a peace of mind from God and a sense of direction, so that no matter what the devil tries to throw my way, it won't prosper because I got God on my side, right? Because I put him as my center of everything else. So I put him as like he's my number one. So as long as he's my number one, all these distractions and all these little things don't even matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I feel like it also just ties into the idea of like, okay, even the practical decisions of asking God, how should I, like, how do you want me to dress, you know? And tying back to the music stuff we were talking about earlier, what music do you want me to listen to? What job do you want me to have? Like, it literally goes down to every single little decision that we make in life. And I think that's ultimately so important because that's how we, one, worship God, and two, be a witness to others of our walk with him. And so, yeah, I think all of that matters.
So then, to play a little bit of a devil's advocate here, someone that, you know, we've just had the discussion of like, we're not free to do everything we want, right? That's kind of contradicting in order to live a godly life, right? God tells us to do certain things, to set ourselves apart. So then why the heck would I want to be Christian if I can't do the things that I want? Tell me.
I find when you do the things you want, to be a little more specific, just do the things you want and not really think of anyone else. Just focus solely on yourself being in whatever you're doing. I find things can spiral, get out of control, and life can come crashing down very, very, very fast when I'm in control, you know? So me personally, like, I'm totally okay with having God in control of everything. I'd rather him in control of everything because my life has been testimony of when I'm leading, deciding, making every choice, what I'm going to listen to, what I'm going to wear, where I'm going to go, who I'm going to hang out with. Life just comes crashing down really, really fast.
Yeah, I've seen what it's like to live without God. So, and it's difficult, but at least when times are tough and there's God there, Jesus is there, you know that there's hope. We can think about the future that, you know, he's been there for me in the past. Why not? Why wouldn't he be there in the future? But yeah, it's easy to look back on your old lifestyle and be like, oh, I wish it was like that and I could do these things. But yeah, like we were saying earlier, we have to be set apart. We're not like the world. So that's just the sacrifice that we'll have to make. And then the rewards that we'll reap will be better.
Yeah, I think people sometimes also assume that boundaries that the Lord sets for us is like a bad thing when it's not a bad thing. It's actually in our benefit. And it reminds me of a game. This is probably like an oversimplified version because I'm not trying to say life is a game because it's very hard at times. But when you have rules for a game, you actually have more fun playing that game because there are rules to follow. Imagine playing something with no rules. It's not fun anymore because you're just doing whatever you want. Everybody's like going here, going there. Like I think of playing Monopoly. Like Monopoly with no rules would just not be a fun game of Monopoly. So I think that having rules and boundaries to live by give you a sense of freedom. So I don't see it as the reverse. You have freedom that you know you're able to move within the bounds that you have been provided or guided to live by. And that in itself makes me anyways feel good. Like I feel freer. I feel lighter because I know where I'm supposed to go, where I'm not supposed to go. I feel safer, you know? And so, because stepping outside of those, like what Joy was saying, like I know what it's like to live my life without Christ and not follow his ways. And it sucks. Like it's so much, it's hard. And you're dealing with all of these emotions and experiences that you don't need to go through. And so you're literally just spiraling yourself on this downward path that you don't need to go down. If you were to just choose the way of life, it genuinely is just so much for human flourishing. It's so much better. And so that's just my personal experience. But so I think boundaries are a good thing. They're not a bad thing as most people make them out to seem when it comes to Christianity.
Yeah, and then a lot of people have the saying that, oh, Jesus is a tyrant. Literally, we talked about it today. Jesus is a tyrant. He doesn't let you do anything. But no, there's freedom. There's freedom in our choice, if that makes any sense. Like he has these rules for a reason to protect us as his children. He knows that, and we even know that when we do these other things, it goes contrary to his word. It's detrimental to us. So, and we also have the choice. He's not going to force himself on us to be like, be my child, no. He will allow us to choose. And then as we walk in Christ, he'll guide us.
The biggest thing I take comfort in is knowing, like, he's dad. Like, and he's setting rules so that, I can grow up to be a nice, caring, responsible, personable human being, And so just like all of our parents have given us rules to follow that aren't to, impose or manipulate us or control us, but rather to make us into good human beings, it's the same thing with God, right? And I think a lot of people oversee that and just think, oh, this guy's a dictator, this guy's a tyrant, this guy's whatever. But again, really just remembering that, yeah, we are his children. He's our dad. He just cares for us and he wants the best for us.
I have noticed, though, that how you're talking about God is like our dad, right? Mm-hmm. I've noticed in parenting styles, and we've studied this in psychology, that there's like the helicopter parents that do too much and they're always on top of their kids or
Yeah.
And then there's the there's the laissez-faire parents that just let their kids do anything. They're very permissive and the kids just, but then some other kids will look at that and be like, oh, they're so lucky, they can do whatever they want. But then sometimes those kids grow up to have no structure, no boundaries, no discipline because their parents didn't give them any rules.
Yeah.
There's something to think about.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, one question that I was thinking about was, how do you guys feel about having this sort of conversation, like with your friends? Like, do you feel comfortable talking to your friends if they're maybe kind of stepping outside of the boundaries or rules or commands that the Lord has set out for us? Do you feel like you guys can have those sorts of discussions with your friends about their behavior or their actions and how they're living their life?
Yeah, I feel comfortable having those conversations. It's just about how to go about having them. Because I've found that when you bring up God, Jesus to someone, instinctively, just naturally, they just kind of turn away, and just kind of show their back to that. So just, I guess, kind of finding ways to be creative to talk about those sort of things and maybe bring them to that person's attention.
But what if they're like your Christian friends? Like they go to the same church as you, but like they go to church on Saturday, say, and then Saturday night they're going out to the club. Like, or like you notice on their Instagram, maybe they're posting scandalous photos on Instagram, and it's like, okay, so how do you feel about having those sorts of conversations? Do you feel as if it's your place to say anything to the people in your life who you may feel as if are not walking in line or being set apart?
I feel like if I love them, if I truly love them and care about them, then it is my place, because if I see that they're living a lifestyle that I myself have indulged in and doing my best to get out of, well, should surrender. Well, yeah, doing my best to surrender and get out of, and now I can notice someone else who's been in the same place I have, then I feel like if I love them, then yeah, I should find a way to speak to them about it and be comfortable having that conversation, and I'd feel fine about pointing it out to them.
I think it goes hand in hand with treat others the way you want to be treated. So not everybody will take the message you want to deliver the same. So I think it really depends on how you deliver the message to them, because everybody's different, because some people may be sensitive than others. So you just gotta find a way that they don't feel attacked necessarily, so that they can understand, or they can feel that conviction,
Yeah, and also I agree on like the way, the delivery. Like I wouldn't go up to someone and be like, yeah, you're going to hell. Like that's crazy, that's insane. Some people feel like that's the way, like being true, like honest, but that can turn people away. So I just think about how if I was in a situation and I was doing something wrong, I would want someone to tell me. If they care about me, they'll tell me. And what if the person is asking for like conviction on what they're doing, or is this too revealing, God, or something? And then God sends me to tell them in a nice way that, okay, what you're wearing may not be appropriate and might be showing a little too much.
Yeah, I think what you said is really important in like God sending you, because yeah, we can have friends, we can have people around us that we may see are doing something that's not so Christian like, but again, sometimes our tendency is to immediately judge, even as Christians, to other Christians and be like, "Girl, what are you wearing?" You know. But sometimes that's not always going to be positive or constructive, right? I think it is important to have accountability, and that is 100% what we're called to do within our community. But again, it's something that you have to do out of humility and wanting what's best for them, not thinking, you know,
I'm
I'm better than you, right? Like, girl, what are you doing? Like, this is not right. Check yourself, right? It's all about your attitude, and again, what God is using you for, right? Because maybe you aren't the one that's supposed to talk to them about it, right? Maybe there's someone else who can do it. So I think that's important. And also Ryan's point of surrender. I think ultimately that's what we're getting at with this theme and this topic of going all in for Christ and for God is surrender, right? And a lot of these things, all the things that we talked about in the beginning, are points of surrender that, again, depending on who you are as a person, will influence you in different ways, and will sometimes be things that God calls us to be like, you need to cut this out. And as Christians, as people, children of God, are we okay with cutting the things out that God is calling us to? So then on that note, what does it mean to be in constant surrender? And do you guys think this is something that you guys are applying in your lives?
I think constant surrender, like I said earlier, it looks like denying yourself daily and trying to make Jesus the first thing, the focus every single day, over and over and over again. You know, you can wake up first thing in the morning and feel like, oh, I want to roll over and sleep. Oh, I want to scroll my phone. I want to get up and do this. But just making that habit, mentally training yourself, spiritually, physically, those things can all tie into putting Jesus first and foremost. Like if you want to go to the gym and get in shape and, you know, get your muscles popping a little bit, like you got to get up and go to the gym every day and work as hard or harder every single time, every day, again and again and again, every single day for however long. With our faith, we have to stay in proximity. We have to remain in Jesus all the time, like every day, over and over and over again. Because when we don't, that's when we're subject to attack from the devil, and then things spiral, get out of control, and life comes crashing down.
And yeah, the consistency is key. The devil never rests. So we have to stay on guard, have our sword of truth, our Bibles at all time, reading our Bibles, staying consistent. And when times get tough, you know, we can put on some worship music, pray, stay in that place of prayer. But it's really the consistency every single day, even every minute, because the devil will use any chance to come in and attack. He knows our flaws. He knows our weaknesses. He can see. He's looking around who to devour, right? So we have to be very, very careful. Yeah.
There's a huge difference when you start your day with God versus when you don't start your day with God. And I find that, at least for me, like prayer always helps. So even when times get tough, and they do get tough, you gotta praise God.
Yeah, no, those are all great points. And I think also, just to add on the point of surrender, I feel like sometimes, I'm gonna be honest, like I don't even know what I need to surrender. But that idea of constant surrender for me looks like, yeah, being like, God, like here's my life. Because there could be points sometimes that you don't even know that you need to cut this certain thing out. But by being in that state of constant surrender, of being like, God, use me, take over, like take control, and he will slowly start to reveal things. I find he will slowly start to reveal things and convict you of things that are like, oh, maybe this isn't so great. Maybe you should stop watching that show. Maybe you shouldn't hang out with those people anymore. Maybe you need to stop scrolling so much. And so kind of stuff like that. For me, that's what constant surrender looks like. And in Jeremiah 29, verse 13, it says, "You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart." Right? So what does that mean? Again, like surrendering everything. And it's not until we do surrender wholeheartedly that he can fully start to transform us, and that we're kind of resumed back into his likeness, which we understand to be his image and ultimately his character, which is all loving, right? And so I think until we make that step of being like, don't take just this little piece of me, don't just take what I do on Saturdays, on the weekends, take my whole week, take my whole life, take my job, take my career, my friends, my community, everything. I'm putting that in your hands. And as I go along, whatever else you call me to cut out or add, I'll do it. Yeah.
And as God sees that we're surrendering ourselves to him, everything that we have, he'll also be honored. Like that that verse that Pastor was talking about today. He said that, oh, I have everything, but what do I need to do to inherit the kingdom? And he said, surrender.
Right. So kind of just to wrap up all these thoughts, God is never going to call us to cut out the things or let go of certain things that aren't in our best interest to retain, right? If something is really beneficial to us and is going to make us prosperous, is going to help us live a good life and inherit the kingdom, he's not going to call us to get rid of that. So anytime you feel like, man, God's telling me to stop listening to this or whatever, and my life is going to suck, it's not going to suck. It's going to get better, right? And he's never going to leave you stranded or bored or alone, right? Whatever he's calling you to let go of is ultimately to benefit you, right? And so he always has the best interest in mind for all of his children. And I think ideally, that's the first thing that we have to keep in mind when we think, what does going all in for God mean? Is letting go of all the things, even though we're attached to them, we know that anything that God is going to call us to let go is only because it's going to harm us. But we know that whatever he has planned for us is going to benefit us instead. Thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you were blessed by this episode. Make sure to come back for the next one as we continue in our journey towards Christ and drawing closer to him. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and share with a friend so that they can be blessed as well. See you guys in the next episode. Bye.